This is our third Guerrilla Talk of the day, and I'm joined here by artist Michael Joo and curator Philippe Vergne. The Walker, yes? MoMA, no. Guggenheim, no. Whitney, Dia? Lacma? Dia, formerly of the Walker, excuse me. And Michael, you live in New York?
Yes, I'm based in New York.
Based in New York, in Brooklyn. All right. Well, we're going to start by talking about animals, because Philippe has noticed a trend.
There was an entire plate of dead animals just there, and I noticed a lot of rhinos.
The rhinos are on both floors over there.
And rhinos on both floors,
yep.
Which is quite impressive.
And Michael's
and there is
zebra.
Michael's zebra and antler downstairs.
Should we keep?
Have you seen other ones?
Yes, there are several dinosaurs also.
There are several dinosaurs. But maybe you should tell us about your zebra. It's a pink zebra, which is unusual for a zebra.
Well, there's a pink zebra and there's a bright, shiny zebra, I think. I mean, but both are cast in the same material. So I was thinking that there were a lot of significant kind of animal forms in Asian culture, and certainly growing up. My father happened to be a Korean cattleman in the Midwest, so okay. I grew up around quite a few of these large sentient kind of creatures. But at the same time, I would come home late at night from being out in high school, and he would be on the couch eating the insides of all of these animals. So that, I was exposed to a lot of different aspects of that.
Does that have something to do with your work downstairs? Is an installation with a large pink painted cast, or the mold of a zebra? Is that right? And then
yes.
On the other side, there's three hanging screens, which are printed with like moving cloths on one side, and then on the other side, there's this forest landscape, and then that's sort of encircles a zebra. Is it standing on a plinth? I actually can't remember what's on the floor.
It's got a bit of a plinth on it, yeah.
And you can see the musculature of the zebra, and then the stripes are done in brass. Are those?
The whole thing is one material, but it's as if all the white is stripped away. So in a way, with the work, I was thinking of trying to combine a couple of different impossible, seemingly binary or opposite things, like the zebra was black and white, and if there's a play on a horse, I thought maybe the only way to create an unassignable kind of, use an unassignable animal form would be to use a zebra. I mean, there's so much symbolism to many of the other animal forms here in Asia that are very typical. A lot of simultaneity, too. I mean, the cast of the mold is the mold in a pre-state of the sculpture. And the other thing that was on my mind, which is kind of in opposition, was probably the idea of, with the presentation of objects, how can you avoid or think about the idea of everything being objectified, including the process. And in many ways, if we look all around, there's quite a bit of the increasing encroachment of objectification of everything, including the process of reaching some kind of end. So I think it'd be more interesting to look back at simultaneity and the idea that all the states can coexist at the same time. And perhaps with that type of view, which I think is something that is in the mix, there might be something to be gained. But maybe that's a bit heavy.
No, it's not. I think if you talk about simultaneity, I think it would be great to move a little bit from the farm, maybe to talk about the piece that you have up at the Asia Society, which is quite striking. And if you talk about simultaneity, you have a Buddha that's part of the collection or is part of the work, or both, and then it's surrounded by a halo. I don't know if you've seen it, an halo of small cameras, and each of them are recording an aspect of the face of the Buddha that we don't necessarily pay attention to, revealing aspect of it. That what we're looking at might be more complicated, more layered than than what it seems to be at the first place. What started this work? Or what was the trigger behind the work that is at Asia Society right now?
I was invited by Melissa Chu over in New York, actually, to rifle through their collection. She had a seed of an idea to let contemporary artists come take a look and see if they're...
This is an older work. It's from 2005, right?
Yeah, it was originally commissioned 2005. And then I feel like it's finally found the right context here in Hong Kong in that particular 3-foot thick walled munitions storage factory. But originally we were asked, a number of us as contemporary artists, to see if we could get any inspiration from the collection of the Asia Society and art and artifacts in a way. I thought at first, what am I going to do here? These are all things that are so impossible to touch or to transcend in terms of their function, and I thought it was a really good way to look at the identity of the object. The further I got into it and the closer I was able to get to them, because you could actually touch them, breathe them, and potentially break them. And I came across this 3rd century Gandharan Buddha, and I was just struck by its similarities to Western kind of classical sculpture. It's definitely a lot of influence of Alexander the Great, probably from that time, and the Western contrapposto. And I just thought, what is a way to get closer to this object that is so separated from us by the fact that it's in a collection, in a private collection, in an institution, taken from a context and then given this new context. So I put a halo of 50 live surveillance cameras around it to see if we're playing every square inch of this iconic sculpture's face and visage, kind of the most important thing about the sculpture, and broke it up so that perhaps we could get closer than we're ever allowed to get.
What's also quite extraordinary, and I went to see the work this morning again, that which is unusual when you look at a sculpture, that you look at it, but at the same time you're surrounded by the sculpture, which is actually looking at you, looking at itself. You are in the process of a totally circular vision. Was it part of it? And between what's here in the fair and at the Asia Society, I think there is a good cut or a good representation of your work in general, bringing together cultural icons, a bestiary, science, religion. All these elements constitute your work?
Yeah, this was my question for you. It's a good one. No, but I mean, maybe then for both of you,
I feel very double teamed here.
Is how do you define your practice? I mean, and what are the hallmarks of this? I mean, we're talking about these motifs that Philippe has raised.
I mean, I think of it. I don't know. I liken it myself to, from a kind of disciplined background in observation, and perhaps overly trained background in analysis from a science background. My interest in objects and transcending the idea of the object isn't to avoid it, and I think it's one part of it is to run straight at it, which might include sometimes colliding with the object, wrestling it in terms of making it, as well as then destroying it and breaking it up. Sometimes that'll require images, and sometimes it'll require extreme materialization, and connoting every single element of the material of the piece itself, from hyper-analytical examination of its contents, if you can say that, or its ingredients, to the calories of energy it might take to make it, to the number of kind of grams of salt your body might produce in perspiring to make it, to the actual act of its production, and then going backwards to record it. So,
Philippe, do you want to add anything to that? How would you define Michael's practice?
So it's meandering.
No, but self-scrutinizing.
Because I have no background in science. I mean, I remember the first time I saw Michael's work. We were talking about that recently. It was in a gallery in Paris, and I didn't know Mike's work at all. Yes, actually, I saw a piece at this exhibition called La Belle et la Bête. You were in this exhibition at Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris, 1994. I saw that, yeah. and I'm not totally senile, so I remember. But you had this piece at Anne de Villepoix Gallery too, where you're jumping, and I think measuring the amount of calories you're spending to jump and reaching a glass ceiling. And for me, I mean, the way I was seeing it was I was encountering a form of sculpture that I didn't really knew before. And as in, often the way for me I look at art, trying to find something I don't understand and something I don't know. And with Mike's work, I was encountering this for the first time, something that for me was extremely difficult to not to put my eyes were totally attracted to it, but what you were putting in place, the thinking you were putting in place behind, was extremely layered and complex. And to answer your question, again, I would see a confluence of our science, daily ritual, religion are informing our perception of the world. I mean, history too. I mean, we were talking in the studio a few days ago, and you were showing me this. I don't know if you want to talk about that. What you're doing in Morocco, this incredible floor sculpture done with layer of archaeological finding that you're casting and making a floor that will be, when you are a sculpture, when you would experience billions of years of history under your feet. Can you talk about that?
I'm working on a project now that Philippe's talking about, of repatriating or trying to bring back together sections of land. But what I was curious about was how can we in this time talk about land and the idea of real estate, but take a different spin on it, not see real estate as a commodity, as an exchange, as some kind of formerly abstract idea that's become incredibly hard through currency and through economics, and instead see it in terms of time and history. So I thought, the only way to access fossils, which is something I've been fascinated with since I was a kid, would be to try to bring something from that far back, which is incomprehensible, into our present experience. And so I began collecting these segments of 500 million year old crinoid fossil bed in the desert of Erfoud in Morocco, from all of the different kinds of markets that this 500 million year old fossil has been dispersed. So I've been working to try to recover them from black markets, museums, collections, traders, and then finally the miners themselves, and try to bring this section of land back together again in such a way that you can navigate it on the floor as a viewer. And I thought, 500 million years old, that's like how many zeros? That's eight zeros, I think, which is just, at that point, 500 million.
Is that what Facebook is worth?
Yeah, right. Close.
A fraction.
A little less, I think. And how would you bridge that gap? So the second level of time, I thought, would be, the socio-cultural history we make from objects. Because in a way, these are casts, the ultimate cast that the planet has made, and time and pressure on a living being. So the next level of time might be the objects that we create. So I've been working with the Smithsonian and various collections to try to laser scan and make a contemporary fossil of parts of objects from our history that we've recorded, that we deem to be relevant, and to try to abstract those and break the object apart over this whole field of fossils that's been itself dispersed. And that would be the second level of time, the time that we create to make ourselves relevant and try to understand our place. And the third level would be for us to try to piece this object together as we walk across the fossil beds, choosing whether we step on a real fossil or a cast, and try to reassemble this object. And that moment of encounter and discovery would be the present tense. And so in a nutshell, without giving it all away, because I think it's really an experience. I mean, I can describe it. Yeah, you had to be there, like most sculpture, I think, really.
When are we going? Or when is it going to be on view?
A theater near you soon, I think.
But when's it happening?
I'm working on it. I've been going on it for about 5 years now, so I think it's indefinite, something in the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully.
Great. And you have a show currently in London, right?
Yes, I have a show at Blaine Southern in London.
What's there? What are you showing there?
I've been interested in different ways of crossing space. And another part of the work, again, involves objects that connote spaces or connote boundary lines. The show there involves borosilicate glass stanchions, velvet ropes. And so there are velvet ropes, there's things that are always this object that's supposed to create a space of division, cultural or social. And again, take that thing as an object at face value. And I made them out of mirrored borosilicate glass. And so they're very delicate, but reflect the surroundings and the viewer. So instead of a binary state, just like the zebra, I'm interested in a kind of third state or third place. And if the object can occupy a third place, then maybe it's not so singular and to be looked upon as this kind of iconic item of that's supposed to be so revered. Perhaps it can simply reflect the surroundings and be a deflector to the outside. I've also become in the last several years I've always been interested in the police riot shield as a borderline and the idea of collectives meeting. So on one hand, with the riot shield, you have a borderline, a temporary borderline that almost looks like an Asian folding screen when they're all together. We're so inundated with press images of these paintings that are made by the attempt at communication and dissatisfaction that's made on the riot shields with paint guns and light bulb bombs of paint. And I've been trying to target those compositions and recreate them using laser sights and scopes and exactly recreate the compositions of specific altercations between the two collectives, the police or the state on the defensive and the collective of the people or on the other side. And that, I guess that attempt of object meeting, Mark, I'm very interested in.
The final question for both of you. I was asking Joseph Kosuth earlier whether or not he still agreed with this proposition of his, which is that the value of a particular artist after Duchamp can be weighed according to how much they questioned the nature of art. Since we're talking about objects that are quite self-reflexive, I thought.
And it's a question.
Yeah, do you believe that? Do you think he's right?
Yeah, of course, of course. I think for me, in my experience or the way, I don't know if you share that, Michael, but the great work of art as a work of art that force us in a way to reconsider the parameter of what an artwork is. And I was talking about the unknown before, so looking at something you don't know. I think if you can identify something you don't know as a work of art, then you're pushing the limit of what, not what art is, but the way you perceive the world around you. I mean, I think it's a great quality of Michael's work, taking all these very complex ideas and formalizing them, crystallizing them in one project that has no equivalent before.
But just to follow up with it, I mean, I'm also a little bit on your camp that art, the value of a great work of art shifts the way that you see the world, whereas Joseph Kosuth was specifically talking about, art that reflects on art itself, that it changes how we think about art as opposed to everything else.
Well, there is always a self-referential aspect of it. I think, artists don't create from a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum like that. But it's more about forgetting for me than bringing back and quoting. I think the history of art, the history of form is a fantastic history of forgetting or digestion. If it's just, bringing back to memory, then it's we eating our own tails, and it becomes circular and slightly boring. Forgetting is better. It's like there is this phenomena in science. I don't know anything about science. You might know that, Michael. The memory of water. You have water and like that, and then you don't see anything. But if you create an electric reaction in the water, every single particles that ever enter the water become visible. So it's a little bit like that. But if you see it then it's a problem. You have to, it has to be fully digested.
Yeah, I think it's something to be sensed or smelled, definitely. I want to listen to you guys.
No, you have to.
No, yeah, I want to. I want to know whether you think that a value of a work of art is how much it changes our perception of art.
No, I mean I agree with the idea of it becoming a reflection of a larger kind of picture. Certainly, I don't think all art has to aspire to do that at the outset. I think it does happen, and I think it happens over time. I don't think it's something that we've been accustomed to, that it happens immediately, and that our moment of reception, which we're so used to getting now, our moment of getting it, and it becomes increasingly sophisticated in a way with our knowledge about our own field.
Yep.
And I think that I really appreciate Joseph's position, in a way as a model for creating what we're talking about right now. I mean, in a way, it's a succinct, closed-off way of speaking about what we're speaking about, but itself a model, just like much of the work.
I just felt slightly envious that there could be a time when you could imagine doing something that would be immediately perceived as shifting the way that you see everything. Like to having that position. I mean, it's like Jerry Saltz has this funny joke about how everyone in New York, goes to the galleries on the weekends hunting for the next paradigm shift. And this hilarious idea that you yourself can perceive shifts in the way that we perceive things.
We're also looking
but
for the next writing shift. Maybe you should be aware of that.
the next writing shift. Okay, this conversation is over. Oh, I'm waiting for the next curatorial shift.
Well, we all.
And the next artistic one. And institutional one.
But I also think the Kossuth position, he's also talking from a moment in art history where the shift that he produced, or his generation produced, was absolutely necessary, actually, to move. Actually,
so in a way, it was long overdue. Or was it so fragile that you could break it?
I don't think it was overdue. I think it was the 60s were this moment where everything was reconsidered. And when he did One and Three Chairs, it was a way, part of the late 60s moment where every institution, every convention with, aesthetic, social, political, needed to be rethought.
A model of life itself right there. Yeah, absolutely a model of the world. In a language we could understand, so incredibly complex and sophisticated and simple at the same time, right? Yeah.
Guys, I want to keep talking to you, but our 20 minutes is over.
We're staying.
Oh, great. All right. Do you want to do the next? You want to keep doing the interviews?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Philippe Vergne, Michael Joo.
Thank you, HC.
Thank you, guys.